This is Politricking
On record, Tshidi.
with Tshidi Madia on EWN.
Hello, welcome to Politricking with myself, Tshidi Madia. This is episode 18 of a politics podcast brought to you by Eyewitness News. So, I've been wanting to chat to Helen Zille for a really long time. I know you've been having conversations. Is she going to be your next Joburg mayor? Her role in the DA, I think, is one people question a lot still. So, I had all those questions and more, and I thought, since we can't get her in Joburg, I might as well come looking for her myself. So I did. I'm in Cape Town. Mind my voice. There's something about secretary generals and the likes, operational people that makes me a little bit sick, I suppose. But I'm in conversation with Helen. Helen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Tshidi. It's good to be with you.
Let's speak about, I want to start with where we are. As you and I are chatting, just down the way from us, the appropriations bill is going to get passed. Ultimately, the last hurdle that allows us to seal the budget and continue with government is getting passed. We saw a lot of back and forth ructions between the GNU partners, which is something that I think over the past year we've become quite accustomed to. The DA has taken this moment, the firing of the higher education minister, which led to this, as a win. Your sense of the moment and the passing of appropriations, and even that it has to take skirmishes to get over the hurdle?
Well, of course it has to take skirmishes because the voters saw fit not to give any party an overall majority. And we got enough votes to have a balance of power, which means that unless we support the ANC's budget, it's not going to get through. And so that gives us a lot of muscle, and we use that muscle because our voters gave us that muscle to use it, and that's why we do.
Simply put. There is a view, though, that Nkabani was always going to go. Part of the conditions you'd given the president is Nkabani and Thembi Simelane. Thembi Simelane continues as minister. She's at Human Settlements. So you didn't get what you told us you wanted.
Well, we're never going to get what we want in its entirety while we've got 22% of the vote. If voters are going to expect us to get everything we want, then we've got to get 50% plus one of the vote. So it's very simple. The more votes we get, the more muscle we have.
But in this coalition, and that leads me to the question of credibility for me, is what happened with this issue. You get some of what you want, not all that you want. If I look beyond this, there was a skirmish, there was a back and forth in the GNU. You don't fully get what you want. You come back to the table. There was an issue about the budget. You didn't vote. You go back to talks, then you come back. So there's a constant back and forth between the ANC and the DA, but ultimately the DA does seem to cave in. The DA has red lines around, look at your facial expressions, let me continue. You gave us red lines around Bella, you gave us red lines around expropriation, you gave us so many red lines, but you walk back seemingly to stay in government on your own red lines. And for me, that is a credibility question. I go, is it the little boy who cried wolf when we look at the DA? What must we make of these red lines where you say, if you don't do A, B, C, D, E, we'll walk, but you don't walk?
Well, in fact, you are completely misrepresenting the situation.
Okay.
There's only one time where we did not get what we wanted to get, and that was on the Bella Act. And that was because in good faith, we were giving the conflict resolution mechanism called the clearinghouse mechanism an opportunity to work. Once we realized that it was a manipulation mechanism for the ANC to bypass the key clauses in the statement of intent, we said we're never having anything to do with this again. And we made it very clear we wouldn't be involved. We're still going to win the Expropriation Act battle. We will still win the National Health Insurance battle. We've walked back on none of those things, and we certainly haven't walked back on any of these things. I mean, Andrew Whitfield was fired. It was outrageous that he was fired because he did what he was supposed to do under the minister's handbook. The president didn't do what he was supposed to do, which is respond to him and give him an answer. And so he was fired for allegedly going overseas without
for defying the president.
No, he
ultimately
didn't defy the president. That's the point. How can you say he defied the president?
So when the president says he felt he had been defied,
what the president
the
feels
minister,
he is and what the fact is totally different things. Andrew wrote and asked for permission. If the president had said no and Andrew had gone anyway, that would have been defying. But if the president never responds and doesn't respond despite the fact that Andrew's office follows up day after day after day, you cannot say that Andrew is defying anybody.
Do we not take into consideration that before all of this, the president had said to cabinet that nobody must deal with this issue of the US, leave it to me? That's the reason why Dion George opted not to go, isn't it?
No, it's not the reason why Dion George opted not to go. And let me just say this to you. When you are in a coalition, nothing gets left totally to one party. Nothing. We have built up connections in Washington over decades, and our connections in Washington are much stronger today than the ANC's are. And you would think that being in coalition with the ANC might say, good, we're really pleased that the DA's got such strong connections at a time when South Africa really needs them, because we in the ANC don't get anyone who'll listen to us, but people still listen to the DA. So maybe you can help us stay in AGOA. Maybe you can help us prevent these incredible tariffs. That's what we were trying to do. And the point is that instead of coming down heavily on us, which made things even worse for South Africa abroad, because we've got excellent connections in Washington, and when the president comes down on Andrew, who's very highly regarded, like a ton of bricks, for going to talk to our connections and friends in Washington, he wasn't claiming to represent the South African government. He wasn't claiming to do that at all. He was speaking from a DA's perspective.
I'm going to come back to Andrew Whitfield.
So, please don't misrepresent things, Tshidi.
I'm not done. I'm going to come back to this because I do think...
I'm not done either. Good.
I know you're not. Yeah. I'm going to come back to this. I do feel you say that you will still win Bella, and you speak about how the ANC...
I did not say I will
you've lost Bella. You'll still win expropriation, you believe. You'll still win NHI, you believe. I'd make an argument that actually you once said to me, and I think it was a 702 interview, you once said to me that the ANC pretty much broke the statement of agreement. What was it?
Statement of intent.
The statement of intent from the very beginning.
Yes, they did.
So I would say that actually your issues were from the very beginning, as per your own words, not mine. So when you say that you had good faith as far as Bella was concerned, including the clearinghouse that was betrayed, I would say that actually you need to go back further. You go back to that very first agreement. You go back to that very, very first moment where you felt you were betrayed. Because then why do you stay there? And I think I asked you that before. I don't think I've ever got a satisfactory answer as to if you're in a partnership with somebody and from the very beginning they show you who they are, which is what you've said in this case, then there'd be no reason to stick around, yet you remain there.
We remain there on our terms.
Oh.
And we've made it very clear that it's on our terms because we are fighting the Expropriation Act, and I'm sure we will win. We are fighting all these acts. We don't sit there and say we're a doormat. We sit there and say we are going to take you on, and we do. We won the VAT battle. We've won the battle around Nkabani. We may not have had everything, but it would be very churlish if we said you have to do absolutely everything before we'll vote for the budget.
I don't believe you actually won the battle on Nkabani. Nkabani was on her way out anyway.
Well, that's what you can say so easily now. But she was only on her way out because the DA said we won't accept her in. She lied to us. She lied to Parliament.
I think the ANC itself was full of Nkabani.
You can invent anything you like inside the ANC. I know what it's like there.
Yes, you speak to them, so you knew. In fact, let me actually deal with that issue now in Whitfield, because from my understanding, the president was actually going to fire her and Whitfield, and that was communicated to the DA. Part of what I found interesting...
I don't know where you get this stuff from. I know what is communicated to the DA, and that the president was going to fire Nkabani from the beginning was not communicated to the DA.
It was not
Otherwise,
communicated
why
at all.
did we have to take the stand that we did?
Which is where I'm going with this, because the question that arises from that is about who the president is with in the DA discussing these things. So when the DA is told that Whitfield's going to get fired, the reaction and the response there, because the ANC rather, says to me, this is why I would prefer to deal with somebody like Helen. Because in a moment like that, she would talk about the consequences on the DA in managing a moment like that, would come up and as a leader have a different conversation about what's the best way forward, as opposed to having the public spectacle, which is what the rest of us see. And the rest of us go, these GNU partners, it will never work. That it could have been better managed with a different leader at the helm.
Look, I don't think it's got anything to do with the leader. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the DA. I mean, the DA has been trying to get up regular meetings forever. We are supposed to have had, I think, 12 meetings now. I've had 4 meetings with Fikile and Balula. We're supposed to meet every second month with the president. That meeting hasn't happened yet. We'd love to talk more to the ANC if they just come to the meetings that are arranged. I did see Fikile and Balula this week, and I was very pleased for that. But we should see each other regularly every month to talk these things through. And if that's not going to happen, and if we can't reach agreement, then the DA is going to fight back, because we have voters to represent, and we won't be the ANC's lapdog. And we won't be there in the GNU simply to bring up the numbers for the ANC.
I think there are a lot of people who feel that that's what's been happening.
Well, so
that
what?
a lot of what's saving, let me finish. A lot of what's saving the ANC at the moment is the DA. Today, Nkabani was left to decision by the DA. You say, yes, we don't get everything we want, but we got something that we want. To the public, the DA rescues the ANC once more.
Excuse me. The public rescues the ANC. The voters rescue the ANC. The ANC got nearly 40% of the vote. We got 22% of the vote. Who's rescuing the ANC?
Helen, you could have allowed for appropriations not to go through. You could have allowed for the collapse of government. You could throw us back towards elections.
Yes. Well, you can't go back to elections now, Tshidi, because the Constitution doesn't allow it to go back to elections now. So let me just say one thing very clearly. We sit strategically and say, what is the least bad option? Obviously, we'd like to have a good option, but until we become the majority party, there's not going to be a really good option for South Africa. So the truth is, we look at every situation, we look at the alternative options, and we say, which is the least bad for South Africa? Not for the DA, but for South Africa. This is very uncomfortable looking around you, around the corner at you. Very weird setup here. Okay.
If you came to Joburg, but anyway, yeah?
I'm coming to Joburg. Diaza.
We'll talk about you in Joburg in just a bit, but yeah. Does the DA still hold aspirations of becoming the dominant party? Do you still have the view of wanting to become the national government of the country?
But any political party must obviously have that view.
How do you get there when you recognize that in terms of numbers, many say you've reached a ceiling? What do you do differently?
Everybody always says we've reached a ceiling. They've said that since 1994 when we got 1.7% of the vote. Watch us.
How do you get there?
By working, by getting into government where we can, by showing that we're better in government, by building up a brand of being honest and getting things done. And slowly but surely we will convince the majority of voters that that is better for them and that good government makes a real difference in their lives. It matters whether they get electricity. It matters whether they get clean water. It matters whether you can drive on the roads. It matters whether the traffic light works. It matters if the law enforcement agencies are working. All of that actually matters. And when people understand how much it matters to the quality of their lives, then I think we will change voting patterns.
Be an interesting one to see. I don't know about when South Africa's voting patterns will change. It's been a year.
If they can't, then we can't be a democracy. Then we might as well close shop.
It's been a year since of being in national government. Your assessment of how the DA has fared?
I think we fared very well. There's not an example that I know of anywhere in the world where a smaller party in a governing coalition has advanced at the next election. And we look as if we're going to buck that trend. And it certainly looks as if we may well grow, and the polling is telling us now that we are growing.
How do you assess your ministers and their performance? What metric? How do you go about reviewing their performance? I imagine you started that already.
Well,
and judge your satisfaction levels with their performance.
At the beginning of their terms, we developed a GPS for them, which is a particular mechanism that we use. And that establishes the key things they want to achieve during their terms of office. And we're working on delivery chains so that we know when they have to achieve which milestone in the process. And that's how they get assessed.
And you're happy with all 6 at the moment?
Well, it's not my job to assess them. I'm not the leader of the party. I'm running the party as the party. I'm not running the DA as a government.
I mean, one would also have to, as a party, no, actually as Helen, I'd also like your general thoughts about what you're seeing, including the leader's performance, because a part of me feels that the work in governance has actually neutralized his work in the party and how people understood John Steenhuisen or who he ought to be as a leader. Those two things are sometimes at odds, and I think it's something that many in the political space are confronted by.
When you say many, is it a random sample of 2 journalists?
No, why would it be a random sample of 2 journalists?
Because that's
Helen?
normally how journalists say everybody thinks X.
No, Helen. No.
We do our polling, Tshidi. We do our polling and we know
That was
what's
very
happening.
funny. No, many leaders, and it's not just a new phenomenon, many leaders who have to find themselves balancing government and politics the world over years. It's always been a difficult juggling act. Just because Helen might have done it well doesn't mean the next person does it well. Your assessment of our John is varying.
I'm not going to sit here and assess my leader on a public platform. I'm absolutely loyal to him. I work very well with him. I think he's doing a good job, and I know he's working day and night and giving everything he's got. I'm not going to sit
That
here.
doesn't answer my question. I understand
I'm
why
not
you're
going
refusing to answer the question.
Well, the point is, this is
Has the government work neutralized his effectiveness in the party,
Not
with
at
his role
all.
in the party?
Not at all. He fulfills his role in the party. He goes to all the by-elections. He is at every major FedEx meeting and other meeting giving the leadership role. No, not at all. He's playing both roles as one does.
Effectively.
Of course.
I was saying to you earlier on that some people say that a different leader would have dealt with some of the conversations and issues with his counterpart, the president, slightly differently.
Well, it'd be nice if we could get a conversation going with the president, wouldn't it?
I imagine.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's what the judgment of the kind of leader
Well,
that
you
is
see,
facing
don't-
might make a determination.
Yeah,
wouldn't
well,
it?
it's the kind of leader that we're facing.
You can make that argument. You can make that argument as well. But that view leads to a few people in the ANC who said to me, in an ideal world, it'll be easier to deal with somebody like a Helen. I spoke to you, I think it must have been earlier this year, where you spoke about how you'll work until the very end. And there were people in the DA who were like, I think Helen is suggesting she's interested in going back as federal leader. A lot of people going back and forth. They got very jittery, Helen. Don't look at me. It's people in your party. Wondering about what's the next direction for you as far as the leadership is concerned. And I know people in the ANC who wouldn't mind having to deal with you in a leadership position than the current.
Well, the worst thing that can happen to me and my political future is to get praised by the ANC. That's very serious. But, frankly, there's never been a question ever, amongst anybody who knows anything in my party that I was going to come back as the leader. Never. I was never going to do that. So anyone who was jittery obviously has got no role to play in the DA because they don't know what's going on in the DA.
But you did say you are still interested in playing a role. And I imagine that it's too crucial a time now to walk away from leadership in whichever form. So when you go to conference next year, what does Helen do?
Well, if I become the DA's mayoral candidate, and I don't know yet, we've had the interviews, but the results of those interviews have not been announced yet, and they will be announced at a later point. If it so happens that I am chosen as the DA's mayoral candidate for Johannesburg, then I will step down as chair of the Federal Council.
How did the idea come about around Joburg to you?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I've been looking for a very long time to get a candidate who I believe can bring Joburg to the DA. And we had several people who were interested. And, when they hear about the job they have to do, with the profile that they have to have, with the battering they have to keep taking by the media, and the difficulty for their families and everything else, and then they see the salary attached to it, they say, no, thank you.
The battering from the media. I take that pot shot. So you've been looking for somebody.
That's mine, my sweetheart. If you want a few pot shots, I've got a few up my sleeve here.
I know that about you. So you were looking around for somebody. You're just going to find anybody that you felt
Well, we've got
was
lots
ideal.
of people inside the caucus, and that's good, but we like competition. So we needed some people from outside the caucus as well. We've got lots of excellent people in that caucus.
I do think so. I actually think that's what I found to be an issue, that you do have excellent people in the Joburg caucus itself. There was a view, Helen, though, that this is also ideal to keep you out of the GNU hairs, that you sometimes complicate the GNU for those who are in that partnership from your party, that it might be easier. If you step down and you focus on Joburg, then it's some way to get rid of you and allow for that relationship to be formed and to thrive.
That's very interesting. On the one hand, you're saying it should rather be me and the GNU, and the other side you're
There are
saying...
different schools of thought in the ANC. You're dealing with very different people. There's different schools of thought in the DA.
Frankly, I don't care what the ANC thinks. I don't
There's different
give
schools
a
of
damn,
thought in the DA.
But I don't give a damn what the ANC thinks. I don't give a fig about what the ANC thinks about what we're doing in the DA. Let them fix the ANC. We'll fix the DA.
And then the views coming from the DA.
Well, what are the views coming from the DA?
This is what I'm saying to you. There's some in the DA who feel it's easier, because the idea of you not being in the federal council is one that comes from the DA. It's not from the ANC. That's a perspective from your part, where people say it might be easier to find ourselves in the GNU outside of Helen being in that space.
Well, I'm not in that space. I'm not in the GNU space. I run the party.
They feel you interfere.
I never interfere.
So
I give my opinion when I'm asked for the opinion. I never interfere.
So the people who in the DA who feel you undermine the GNU and are a threat to the GNU from your own party, they misunderstand?
I promise you, until you quote me somebody, I will
can't do that.
know
I can't quote my sources.
for sure that you're not giving an accurate picture, to put it mildly, because I know what we do and I know how we work and I know how things function. And I never interfere in the GNU. I don't have a role to. I have no locus standi to do so. If my opinion is asked, and John and I have a very good working relationship, and he sometimes asks my opinion, I will give my opinion honestly. And if things happen and they're going wrong and we have a meeting at which I am present and I have a speaking turn, then I will express my view. Like everybody does. We're a democratic organization.
So the idea that they feel threatened,
Who feels
you think is a fallacy? That they feel that the GNU faces a threat from you, that's a fallacy coming from me.
There's no such. I mean, it's just bizarre where that comes from.
Strange. All roads lead to the DA for me around that particular topic, but I take that. I'll take you saying that it's a nothing view. The idea of Joburg for me is also interesting, Helen, because the DA has had a hand in Joburg. Why not approach Mpopalati once more?
She was very free to apply. Anybody can apply. That's how it works in the DA.
But you also go out and seek talent where you think it exists. It was you who went to Herman Mashaba, was it not?
Yes.
It was you who approached Mampela Rampela, was it not?
Yes.
So where you think that there is talent, having seen what you've done in Joburg, was she not worth pursuing?
She's inside our system. She's a member. Everybody knows that applications are open. Everybody knows they can apply. And everybody's welcome to apply.
The DA has had a hand in Joburg. The DA has had a hand in Tshwane. The DA has had a hand in Ekurhuleni. The DA speaks about a DA difference. Mm-hmm. Those cities, I don't think necessarily felt the DA difference that you guys speak about when you speak of the Western Cape. What would be so different should your candidature be successful?
Well, voters must decide if they want it to be different or not. And if voters split the vote amongst all kinds of tiny parties, then we will end up with an 8 or 9 party coalition and it will fail. So voters have to decide if they're serious about their city and if they want their city to come right again. And if they do want that, then there's a clear option.
You don't have an argument around Tshwane, for instance. I still say that I know you're putting it in the voters' hands, but I want to speak about the impact, or at least the experience, rather, on the DA's part of experiencing what the difference and the difficulties were in trying to turn Tshwane around. And why is it that months after you left Tshwane, people will make an argument that the DA experience that is spoken about wasn't felt? The same thing could have been made to a degree about Joburg. I live in Ekurhuleni. I made that argument about Ekurhuleni.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, if it takes 30 years to break a city completely, it's not going to take 6 months to fix it. And people need to understand that broken systems are very, very difficult to repair. It's much easier to break a city down than to build it up. Now, Cape Town, everyone sees the difference in Cape Town. It's because it's a difference of the DA being in power for 20 years. And of course that makes a massive difference because you go a little step forward every day, and after 20 years, the difference is very visible. If you've gone a little bit backwards every day for 3 decades, the place is going to look like Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni and some parts of Tshwane. And it's going to take at least 2 terms to get to the point of fixing it.
Yeah, The state of Gauteng's metros is completely disheartening. That I do know. I'm not going to get into this back and forth about Khayelitsha.
Well, you're
because I
very
know what
welcome
you'll say.
to. You're very welcome.
I know
to.
you'll tell me that you put more resources into Khayelitsha.
I'll tell you the facts.
But I think the argument there for me will always be, does the city respond as fast enough to the issues that are raised in Khayelitsha as it does in Camps Bay? And I'm not sure. I think I also worry about the spatial planning in Cape Town. I think it literally hasn't shifted nearly enough. I think that the nodes of economic development opportunities are still very much directed in one direction in Cape Town when I look at it. I don't think enough has been developed outside, so I don't want to get into it. I think there's some points that you've made around Khayelitsha that I see. I've been there for the first time this year, that I see and I understand. But I also think that there's some things that should have been done that haven't been done and been done better. That should have been done.
Like what?
I literally just mentioned them.
Well, let's talk about that. Nodes in other areas. Okay, there's a big node in Belleville. There's a major node in Mitchell's Plain and lots of businesses there in the town centre and all of that. We did our very best to put up a node in Philippi. The truth is you can't force businesses to open where you want them to open. They will open where the location is best for them. We put an incredible amount of effort into trying to get a business node going in Philippi, and people just weren't interested because of the crime rate. You will never get business where there is high crime. They leave that area. So businesses are going to take a rational, market-based decision. They're not going to go where politicians tell them to go.
And the crime argument that you now make part of the conversation is a national competency.
Well, you look at it, of course it's a national competency, but, you know, the truth is that I think J.P. Smith has done heroic work around safety in Cape Town. Heroic work. Around neighbourhood watches, around partnerships, building the Metro Police, taking him to the areas of cooperation with the National Police Service, investigations, crime prevention. He has literally done heroic work.
J.P. Smith, that conversation, let me leave J.P. Smith's name out of it, because I do think that there's more to the J.P. Smith conversation, but it'll take its time. It'll unfold on its own time. The conference next year, we laughed off the idea of Helen Zille being federal leader. You're very comfortable.
100%. The last thing I want to do is go back to being federal leader. There are other jobs I can do and there are other places I can add value, but federal leader is not one of them.
In continuing in your position, if you don't get the Joburg mayoral candidature?
I could. We'll see. I haven't really thought that far into the future. I looked at the possibility of becoming a mayoral candidate again, and I thought to myself, that is a big challenge. I like challenges. I like big challenges. And Joburg is going to be a quite enormous challenge, and it's not going to be a challenge of 2 or 3 years, believe me. It's going to be an ongoing challenge for a very long time. But the first challenge is whether the voters want to save their city, because nobody can save that city if the voters don't make a decision to save that city.
You spoke about, obviously we will call you because that's who we are as journalists to find out more and what your vision is around Joburg. But you did speak on it ahead of the process, ahead of the interviews. That doesn't disadvantage anybody else. You are Helen, after all.
Well, anybody is allowed to go public about their candidature. I didn't go public about my candidature at all. But a journalist, you know how they are. They speak to everybody all the time and they get
Those
little tidbits here.
people.
And they learn pesky people, that's for sure. That's an understatement. And they get a little tidbit here and a tidbit there, and then they phone you up, and that's how it works.
You don't think it disadvantages other people?
I don't think so. It could, in fact, advantage them.
So in terms of next year's conference, the question of leadership will arise again in terms of who's ideal to take the DA forward. I know you said you've got confidence in John Steenhuisen. Is that ideal? Should he choose to run again? That's the ideal person to continue leading the DA.
Well, in the DA, anybody can run. I was never elected uncontested. I think, yes, once we didn't have an election, but otherwise I was always contested. In all the elections that I ran, I was contested. And that's what we like in the DA. We like competition. We like challenges. And we don't wait to be approached or invited or asked. We put our hat in the ring and we say, I'm putting my hand up. I want to go.
That doesn't answer my question, though. Should John be up? Should John contest again? Should he seek re-election? Is he the right person to take the party towards its next chapter?
Look, the only people's view that matters on that question is the Congress. The Congress will make up its mind. We'll have a vote there, and the Congress will decide. And it would be entirely appropriate for me to be John's praise singer, because it's not fair to the other candidates if there are other candidates. And we all recognise that. We have free and fair elections in the DA.
There's a conversation about a motion of no confidence from the Umkhonto we Party that Parliament must grapple with. It could mean anything, really. Anything. We're in an unpredictable, I think, space as a country. Should the situation create an environment where John must be somebody who we consider the president, would he be ideal? Is he ready for that kind of challenge?
To be the president? Well, we wouldn't have elected him leader of the party if we didn't think so. I mean, the point is, if you're a leader of the party, you've got to understand you could potentially be president. And the more the ANC loses support, the more people from other parties are going to be in the running to be president.
I'm grappling with a couple of things around.
Well, please grapple. Grapple away.
And how he's navigated the space. It's just a thing. I don't have an issue with him. I just think it's just a thing. Something
but if you've got an issue with him, don't make it my issue.
I don't have an issue with anybody, Helen. I don't have an issue with anyone. The issue of managing those in the DA who were not happy to get in the GNU. I think all the at least the ANC and the DA, did have people on both ends who weren't happy that they got into a partnership. The back and forth about whether to stay or go kind of continues. And the ANC, I've noticed, they haven't had an NEC, and there's a reason why that's happening.
They have had an NEC. They had one this last weekend.
No, they did not have an NEC this past weekend. They had a National Working Committee meeting, not an NEC.
It was an NEC.
No, the NEC has the power to decide to get out of the partnership with the DA. They're avoiding that at all costs. That's what's been clear to me. So they're protecting this partnership from what I can see.
I'll check, but I thought it was an NEC they had this last weekend.
On this score, I can tell you for free it isn't. They're not going to have an NEC anytime soon. How's the mood in the DA in terms of the GNU? Because there's so many spats that happen, there's so much back and forth, there's so many skirmishes. The pendulum in whether to stay, this might be ideal, versus leaving on your own, versus being kicked out. What are the conversations? What's the mood?
Well, you're assuming that spats are bad.
No, I don't think spats are bad.
They're not bad at all.
No, I definitely
mean, when you're
don't
in
think
politics,
so.
you're there to stand up for your voters. And we do that all the time. And if that leads to some conflict, then so be it.
And the managing of that, Helen, that's what I'm actually speaking to.
That's right. That's why we say there's got to be the institutionalization of Clause 18 and 19 of the Statement of Intent. And we've been saying that for the longest of times.
Why not take that statement to court? Because I also struggle with that, where, again, you say the ANC broke it from the very beginning.
They've ignored
the
it
DA,
from the very beginning.
Well, that's what you said. The DA doesn't hesitate to go to the courts if it knows there's something that's watertight, that's legally binding, that it can challenge. You definitely go and show that example. Why haven't we tested this thing with this coalition? It's
because it's not justiciable. And that is precisely why our our bill in front of Parliament, the threshold legislation, makes these agreements enforceable by a court of law. That's precisely what we're trying to do in that legislation that we hope will go through before the local government election.
Until then, we're kind of stuck in this weird back and forth.
Yeah, well, we're a country getting used to coalitions. And so we don't have thresholds, which we should have thresholds. There's no coalition agreement that sticks because the ANC just ignores them. So we have to make them enforceable in a court of law. All those things have to be there in the law. And that is what the DA is trying to get through Parliament at the moment.
Do you look back at that day when we were at the Cape Town Convention Centre and that last minute agreement for the election of a president at the 11th hour, really, when the ANC and the DA found one another, I think with the IFP on board as well. When you look back at that, did the DA make a mistake giving them a president before getting everything that you wanted? Because you could have actually traded off for a lot more, surely.
You know, when we said we want 10 cabinet ministers, because that is what we're entitled to, every journalist went into a meltdown. How cheeky, how terrible, how dare you? And now you say we could have traded it off for much more. The media went into a collective
You couldn't
meltdown.
care less what we say. You call us pesky, so it doesn't matter what
Well,
we
I
want.
really don't care
what
what
I'm
you say, but
asking,
the point
what I'm
is-
asking is, could you not have gotten more? You gave them a president. If you walk away from the GNU,
Right. Let me say this. We were in a situation where, according to the Constitution, we had 2 weeks to
Yes,
reach
a time
some
crunch.
kind. We had a time crunch, not of our own making, of the South African Constitution's
yes,
making. right?
yes.
So we had a good agreement, and I don't know if this is just through design or through inefficiency, but we reached agreement with the ANC, and at the last minute, I think they take it to some structure or other, and they change the document entirely. And when you're down to the wire, and the ANC's come with a completely new document just about the night before, then you have to focus on what are the critical things to get through. And we got the critical things that we had to get through. One was the composition. One was the way we would take decisions. And the other thing was, what was the third one? There were three that were absolutely critical. Proportionality, that's right, how decisions would be made, and the composition of government. Those were the things we had to focus on in the end, because that was all there was time to do.
I still say, for a party with the kind of experience that one expects the DA to have, I felt that the DA was outwitted. There's an argument that some would make that it was, and I think some in the DA that I've interviewed said, we approached it in good faith. We're dealt with by the ANC in bad faith. That's how they put it. And I said, you should be much more experienced. You're not novices at what you do.
Right. This is our first time we've been in coalition with the ANC.
No.
Yes.
What happened here in the lead up to your rise in government in this very province?
We were never in coalition with the ANC.
You never worked with the ANC?
Never. This is our first time in coalition with the ANC. And let me make one thing very clear to you. Where we were naive was that we expect certain elements to be taken for granted in relationships. We believe that people give their word and then they stick to their word. We believe that people sign a document and then they fulfill the obligations under that document. We believe that we agree on certain mechanisms of meetings and others, and people will bring their part responsibly and with commitment to the process. The biggest difficulty with working with the ANC is the complete culture shock of realizing that none of that happens. None of it.
What will it take for the DA to walk away from the GNU?
When walking away is the least bad option.
And at this point in time, you're not there yet.
Well, we were going to be very well there if the president said, we're kicking out Andrew, who's an honourable, hard worker and committed person who did exactly what he was supposed to do, and then keeping Nkubani in the cabinet. Then we would have walked away. We can't bear that level of hypocrisy.
I mean, you waited until we get to appropriations, which is today. Andrew was fired how many weeks ago? You kind of sat around kicking the ball back and forth.
No, dear. That question must be asked to the president. Andrew went overseas in February.
Even the
Why
president
did
must
it take
answer.
him
No, you
4
I agree.
months?
I agree that he's got a question to answer about
And
timing.
the very, very...
But at the same time, hold on, Helen, hold on. I agree that there's a question about his timing. Why did he wait so long to act? If indeed it was insubordination, he's got to answer that question. The question for me with the DA is, you did give him an ultimatum. When you say that particular moment, when he fired Andrew, you said earlier, when I said, but with the firing of Andrew, I understood to be attached to this other woman is going to go. If the DA said that wasn't the fact, then why did you stick around to wait for appropriations, to strike a deal around appropriations in order to stay in the GNU?
No,
That's what I'm not understanding.
No, you're not. You're definitely not understanding.
What am I missing?
You're missing a lot.
Okay, help me.
So I will help you. When the president does something like this, the DA meets, and we say, okay, what are all the options we can take? And there's never one option. There are always 6 or 7 options.
Absolutely.
You can do nothing to you can walk away to everything in between. We decided that it wasn't something we should bring the government down over necessarily. We should say to the president, okay, we're not going to participate in the national dialogue because you can't even dialogue with us. Why are we going to have a national dialogue? Number one. Number two, we will not vote for Nkobani or Simelani's budgets. It's very simple. Those were the two things we said, and said immediately. And that is what we did immediately. There was no time lapse. But because of the budget process, as you know, in Parliament, has the individual budget votes, and then they have the blanket appropriation, which is today.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what you weren't understanding.
I'm still not satisfied in terms of whether or not that answered my misunderstanding, but okay. Is it better to get kicked out or to leave?
Well, it depends on the issue. Sometimes things are so egregious that you leave on principle. Other times you say, well, we're here, and if you don't like us, kick us out. It depends on the issue.
I think Paul Mashatile was an issue for the DA at some point. And the idea that the ANC has a succession issue that's playing itself out, and the fact that they're going to a conference. Ramaphosa is done. He's serving his second term as president. You have to look to what happens. This coalition will be tested again in that regard. Is Paul Mashatile still a no-go for the DA? Is it a question of you'll be willing to see when you get there?
The truth is, we'll wait for the ANC's Congress, we'll see what happens there, and we will take the least bad option as a consequence. There's never a good option if you're in coalition. Never. You always have to take the least bad option.
It's interesting that you say earlier, I'm done, and I swear. It's interesting that you said earlier, you don't care what the ANC says, but you're so vested yourselves in what that outcome will be because of the consequence of the relationship that you're in with the ANC. Equally, the ANC looks to your conference next year and wonders what must happen going forward, because they too will have to work with whoever's elected.
Well, they don't have to. They can decide whether they want to or not.
Fair point. But they will be vested, and it does matter.
Well, it matters for South Africa, who the major leaders of the major parties are. Absolutely, it does.
I agree. As we part, I still feel very much a lot of the ANC, and I said it to you earlier, I am done. I swear I'm done. I still very much feel that a lot of saving of the ANC is left in the hands of the DA. You had made an assessment yourself at some point of what is the ANC's fate as it stands. When you look at it now, because there are people who believe that they don't need you, but there are people who believe in the ANC that they do need the DA by their side. Your assessment now?
Well, you need numbers to govern. You need to give it above 50%. Running a minority government is very, very difficult. I've done that once, and it's extremely difficult. So you have to try and put together a coalition that will take you above 50%. So they were either going to do that with the EFF and MK, or they were going to do it with us. And again, as I say, in coalitions, there's never a perfect answer. There's always, it's bad, worse, and worst. Those are normally the options. And you take the least bad option.
I'm actually almost, I did say I was done. I'm now almost done. Former President Jacob Zuma being in Morocco, part of the foreign policy conversation I do need to have with you is a little bit. What was your sense when you saw former President Jacob Zuma in Morocco with the South African flag? He was there on MKP business, but drags the country into it with the flag. He's been labeled a sellout by some people. Your stance, your view?
Look, I do believe that people are free to travel the world, and so are leaders of political parties. Everybody knows he's not the president of South Africa, so he couldn't go there and speak for South Africa. And he's allowed to go there on a fact-finding mission, to meet people, whatever. I believe in freedom.
Simply put. And then the back and forth between the ANC and the DA around foreign policy. I see there's been also a back and forth between Emma Powell and I think the president's spokesperson Vincent Magwenya around Mcebisi Jonas.
Yeah.
Your sense of what's happening there, and also what does it mean for the DA to have a stronger footprint on the international scale? I imagine, as a party that has ambitions to grow, you also want to have more influence in geopolitics.
Well, obviously, for all the years we've been in opposition, we've built up major links all over the world. We've been very prominent in Liberal International for decades and decades. And so we have these links, and we have the links with all of the established democracies that we believe are much better role models than authoritarian states for South Africa. And so we're looking to make a success of South Africa by ensuring that our democracy works and that our economy grows. And we're looking at countries that have achieved successful, sustainable democracies and sustainable economic growth. Those are our examples that we're looking to, and we have made incredibly good contacts across the democratic world.
All right. Forgive me. I'm sorry. This is the last time I do this, I swear. Every
The
time I
second
think I'm
last
done,
time.
there's more that I need to actually ask you. Liam Jacobs, watching that episode where somebody who's young that the DA is invested in, flip overnight, joining another political party, and saying it's because there's no representation as far as the colored representation is concerned. He flipped literally overnight. What was your thoughts when you watched that?
Well, you've answered your own question. I mean, he came into politics very young, very confident, very self-assured, and to become an MP at 22 is a very big step and shows just how much the party has invested in you. And then to switch overnight and find a reason that was there, in fact, from the beginning, as you say, is a complete flip. And he will know the reason. I know a bit of the background. There are disciplinary processes in our caucuses, and whips expect a certain level of compliance with those processes. And Liam, being young and bold, perhaps didn't like those strictures as much as other people are expected to accept them. And so he decided to leave. That's just how it is.
But he then plays into this coloured vote back and forth and all of
does.
this.
Of course he does.
Does that not concern a DA? Because while we look at the NC's trajectory, because it's had such a greater consequence, the truth of the matter is the DA, as much as you have ambitions of growth, its trajectory is also downward. That's also the truth of the matter. Even here, that's something that the PA has picked up on and is actually focusing on. Does that not concern the DA? Does it not mean going back to the drawing board and re-strategizing?
Well, race essentialism does concern the DA because we don't believe that race makes you a good or bad public representative. And we believe that race is a social construct, and we are committed to being non-racial in the DA. So, of course, there are people in this area of identity politics who are going to pump up racial identity, and that is a phase that will pass. So I have absolutely no doubt that there are a lot of people who will go for the politics of racial nationalism and racial identity and all of that for a while. But that has a shelf life, and that shelf life will be over, I would say, in 2 years.
What does the DA do now, though, in the meantime, to respond? Do you look at your cabinet and wonder if there's to be a wholesale cabinet reshuffle? Do you change to speak to those issues of race that they've been flagged? Do you try and address those questions in the now, or do you leave it and wait for time to deal with it?
The truth is that the DA is the only party that seeks to address those challenges. I mean, the ANC is a uniracial party to all intents and purposes. Gayton is boldly proud that he's a uniracial party. I mean, the only party of which diversity is expected is the DA. And that's another fantastic double standard in the media, apart from the many other double standards that they exist. We seek to be diverse, and we are getting to be diverse through focusing on merit. When we focus on merit, we become diverse. And that is the objective we're trying to fulfill, and we're getting closer to it every day. If people feel more attracted to the politics of racial identity, well, then they must go there and have a short shelf life.
Would it not be easier to put it to bed by just... One of the things that I find interesting is with every black leader that leaves, the conversation comes back again. Would it not be easier to put it to bed by just having an investigation and saying, guys, this is where you're wrong. The past is not part of our present. Yes, there have been leaders who consistently say the same things. We've looked into our party. These things have no merit.
But there was an
the
investigation.
Same way.
There was an investigation.
What was the investigation? What did it find?
Musi Maimane set up the investigation that said that the reason that the DA was going backwards was because of poor leadership. That was the investigation.
That was an investigation into Musi's leadership, wasn't it?
No, it was an investigation to why we were losing votes in that election.
I felt like that was a more... Because that's an investigation that looked into, in essence, Musi's leadership. That led to his 2019 departure.
It came to the conclusion about Musi's leadership. But you see, every time a white person leaves us, there's not this beating of chests. Every time a black person leaves the ANC, far more black people have left the ANC than have left the DA. And whenever a white person leaves the ANC, even Carl Niehaus has now left the ANC.
He was kicked out of the ANC.
Well, there's not a single white left. Why didn't you make a big fuss about that?
What's Barbara Creasy?
Barbara Creasy.
If you want to go back to the race, I mean...
One. A representative sample of one.
No, we're not going to go pick at all their whites. But anyway, because then there are many. But anyway,
Right.
okay.
Don't go to race. Go to quality. I think Barbara's competent, and I think she's there for
Absolutely.
a reason. You see? So I don't judge her by her race. But if you're going to go to race, I'll bring a lot of examples.
Okay. No. So the Liam issue for you, he was running away from being held accountable by the party.
No, man. I like Liam, and I got on well with Liam, and I don't want to clap him in any way. The thing that I will say about it is, though, it takes many years in politics to know that getting bashed about is part of what you bought into. And to know that you mustn't take yourself too seriously, and to know that you're going to get clapped from every single angle, and you just have to dust yourself off and get on with it. That is what you have to know in politics. And if you don't know that in politics, you're going to learn some very hard lessons. Now, I've often found that young people come in and they get into the spotlight and they quite like the limelight for a bit, but they don't realize it isn't limelight, because the minute you get a spotlight on you, that's the next thing is going to happen is you're going to have your head cut off, and you're going to have to survive that. And so it takes some hard knocks to get to that point. And it takes hard knocks for everybody to get to that point. So what I say to young people is, when you get disillusioned, when you get angry, when you say, I didn't buy into this, just ask yourself and just remind yourself that there has never been a single person who left the DA who wasn't sorry afterwards. So go through your knocks inside the DA, take it and move on.
I wonder about that.
Well,
I think if you go to Action SA, you'll get a very different answer.
I don't think so. I don't think Action SA is going to be on the ground much longer. You go to Action SA, ask them a few questions. Perhaps I know a lot more about what's going on in that party than you do.
Time will tell. Time will tell.
Time will tell.
Some wise words there for young people, I think, in political spaces.
Time
and I'm
will
going to leave it on that note. Thank you so much, Helen.
It's a pleasure, Tshidi.
This is Politricking
On record, Tshidi.
with Tshidi Madia on EWN.